Okay, everyone, welcome back. For those of you who have been following this series, and I welcome all of y'all who actually want to learn about. And I want to make one thing clear here. You might get the inclination for some of my things. I might be trying to convert you to away from Christianity to Islam. My motives here are purely educational. There are a plethora of religions and philosophical paths on the planet Earth, and we don't have to agree. You know, it's... Some people diametrically disagree with that. I have a philosophical disagreement with them. Some of them want to kill me. Those are extremists. As some would say, oh, so say. Now, I'm trying to point out here that there's a lot of ignorance going on in regard to what Islam actually is. Whether you agree with it or not, and there's some key differences between Islam and Christianity. But neither one of them are more evil than the other. There's just a little bit of differences and things. Anyways, in the last part we covered good old Jesus. We found out that, contrary to popular all Muslims are terrorist belief and Islam is the devil, for the most part, Christians and Muslims largely believe the same thing when it comes to Jesus. Not identical, but largely the same. So now let's roll the good old theological Wayback Machine to the beginning. And let's look at Adam. In this series, we're not getting into Eve, and we're definitely not getting into Lilith. So, let's get into good old Adam. What do Christians believe about Adam? Well, there was this little place called Eden, it was paradise on earth, and, Adam disobeyed God. It's the whole original sin thing. And it's part of man. At least now it is. This is not what Muslims believe. And this has to do with something, a philosophical disagreement at its most basic. The sin that Adam committed was he ate fruit from the tree of knowledge. The English version of Genesis, the commandment from God was, shall not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, the conservative interpretation of this is that knowledge is evil. It's funny how the verse says good and evil, but the part that always gets focused on is evil. Personally, I think this is a verse that's largely misinterpreted. It speaks of the wisdom that it is impossible to take of knowledge without taking of both its good and its evil, its light and its dark, its ability to create and its ability to destroy. Once one takes knowledge into themselves, they are burdened with the choice of how to use that knowledge. Several people over the eons have said it is easier to destroy than to create. And that is a temptation that is most burdensome. Because you have to continually choose not to destroy. Not to take the easy road out, not to abuse that knowledge. Don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. Doesn't mean the knowledge is evil. It just means it comes at a price. Muslims believe that Adam is free from sin and was a prophet of God. Which is a fair analogy for Adam. First man, prophet of God. Adam talked with God. Adam told his children about God. If you believe in the whole Adam thing. So, yeah. not so sure that's too much of a disagreement there. The disagreement there is the way the knowledge is looked upon in Islamic teaching isn't that way. Knowledge is neither good nor evil. Knowledge is. And knowledge is actually in something that, and this is one of those things where Christianity stands firmly on one side of the topic and Islam stands firmly on the opposite point of view. And that is seeking knowledge right or wrong? As a matter of fact, as Islam teaches, the general agreed upon core with regards to knowledge is you're supposed to seek it. In fact, it's one of the best things you can do as a person is to seek knowledge, learn, and improve upon yourself. And this isn't what Christianity teaches. Christianity teaches that knowledge is forbidden, and man has been burdened with sin ever since man partook of knowledge. So we definitely don't need more of it. It's a philosophical disagreement. Is the burden of that choice a good thing or a bad thing? We could have a 5-hour plus philosophical debate on that topic alone. Is it any wonder that there's two religions that happen to disagree on it? I'm just saying. So, now let's move on to the other little thing. Oh, and I apologize. So I think at one point here I said the Bible was in Arabic. It never was. So that's a problem there. We pointed out in the last part how this was a conflict of language. Then again, I would say there's conflicts of languages between several sects of Christianity and Christianity against Judaism. So, but the primary languages is the Bible, and there's others, because Latin isn't on this list, but it should be, is Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Anything other than those languages are translations. And in some cases, those languages are translations. Bible was written over time. So, yeah. In the Qur'an, it is in one language, and one language only. Arabic. Now you can get a Qur'an in English, but it's going to be in columns, or it's going to be organized one of two ways. You're either going to have a verse written in Arabic, followed by the verse translated into English, or it's going to be in columns, where in each page are split pages. But basically, you're going to have the Arabic written next to an English translation, or French, or something, or whatever. But every Qur'an you're ever going to get your hands on, unless there's a radical change in the Muslim religion, is going to have the original Arabic, and only the original Arabic, or the original Arabic next to whatever translation it's been translated to. It is the belief in Islam that you should learn the language the book was written in, and you should read it without translation. Now, in the fullness of time, they've decided that translations next to the original is okay, because the original book's still there, and the translation will help you to learn the original, so that you can read the Arabic. I don't read Arabic, so some of my readings of the Qur'an may be not 100%, because I'm reading the translations. And this is a fact that Muslims are very, very, very proud of. That their holy book has not been translated. That there are translations to help you learn to read it, but that the book itself has not been translated in over 1,000 years. Because the Muslims believe that this is the Word of God. You don't correct the Word of God. You learn to read the Word of God. God intended it to be in this language. You will learn to read it in this language. Not necessarily such a crazy belief, but you need to understand that. It's like people's like, well, why don't you just pray? One of the things that bugs a lot of people in the U.S. is, why don't you just pray in English? Well, understand what you're asking there. You're asking them to translate. That's asking a lot. And really, does it hurt? Does it hurt you to hear somebody speaking Arabic? You know, it's like, oh, I don't know, you're not like praying for God to kill me. Okay, if you really think that's what they're doing, go learn Arabic so you can go tell the police what they said in their evil devil tongue. And you'll realize that that's not what they're saying. So, it's like I said, most of this is a language barrier, especially in the U.S., because most people in the U.S. don't understand this culture clash. They definitely don't understand Arabic at all. And they're letting their fear get a little away with them and just be convinced, absolutely convinced, that bad things are being said. When the reality is it's probably nothing could be further from the truth. Now, let's go ahead and get into, the ethics of the theology. For Christians, it's the quote-unquote golden rule. Excuse me. Yeah, we're going to skip over the fact that in both religions there's additional guidance. Before we get into that, because the golden rule thing is going to be a little long. It's going to be a third part of this one. I don't know how many parts I'm going to get into tonight. The additional guidance thing has to do with additional interpretation. Probably the strongest influence in regards to that in Christianity is the Roman Catholic Church. There is an additional work in Islamic teachings, which would be the Hadith, which is basically a saying of stories of the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah, basically his companions and relatives' point of view. Basically, say Jesus' brother had kept a diary. Is the closest analogy I can give for a Christian to understand. It isn't the holy book, but some draw from it. And the closest analogy to something that has that much influence in the Christian religion is the interpretations, laws, and rules of the Catholic Church, which aren't always from the Bible. Things like the no fish on Friday. Things like that. It's like they were laws of God's kingdom in the church, as long as the Catholic Church said they were so. The writings of the friends and family of Muhammad, basically like, well, maybe these are things Muhammad forgot to write down, but maybe we should take heed of them. Muhammad did this, even though it didn't make it into the Qur'an. We are following his teachings, after all. Okay, that's up on time for this part, so if you want to continue to learn about the similarities and differences, you're going to have to join in the next part.